What's up, basketball fans? Welcome to the Warriors Report. It's time to talk about the Toronto Raptors because they are being linked to three names in this year's NBA draft, and the three of these names could possibly end up in the lottery. So I'm going to be talking about each of these individual players. So if you're ready to watch this video, make sure to hit the subscribe button and let's get right into today's video. Now, as you know, I do like to give out shout outs on my channel, and I actually have 3 shout outs for today. I've never given up so many shout outs in one video. And shout out to Corey, Jeff, and Joshua. Thank you to all 3 of you for supporting this channel. To your likes and comments, it is very much appreciated. Now let's talk about the first player, and this is a name we've been hearing so much about. I first thought of this player back in January, late January, when I started scouting some players. I started looking at mock drafts, and I had really hoped the Raptors hadn't given up their second-round draft pick because I really projected him to go in the second-round draft pick. At that time, he was projected to go around the 29th, 30th spot. Yet we've heard so much of this name, and this player has probably been more talked about in this last week outside of the top 3 prospect. And this one is no other than Bilal Coulibaly. And I'm going to put up this source that was reported a little while back by a Raptors update on Instagram, which was reporting that Bilal Coulibaly has a promise in the lottery before pick number 14. Toronto has kind of shown the willingness to take on project picks, and this was being reported by Jonathan Wasserman. Now, it was also being reported in a video as well, which I'll play for you guys, which stated that Oklahoma City Thunder and the Toronto Raptors could look at Bilal Coulibaly, but another team could look at him as well.
Like the biggest rumors are, maybe the Thunder like him, the Toronto likes him, but I'm hearing that maybe even Utah could have some interest in him at number 9. I've heard it from multiple sources.
Now, I haven't been scouting NBA draft as much as maybe some of the other YouTubers, but I'm not going to lie. In the last few years, I have never seen a player climb his stock as quickly as Bilal has been in the last few weeks. He's been talked about so much. Now, what makes him really intriguing is he's a wing player. Obviously, the NBA is trending in that direction. He's 6'7", 6'8". He's got a wingspan of about 7'2", 7'3", which makes him really attractive. And when you take a look at NBA teams that were trying to acquire a 3-and-D in this year's NBA trade deadline, a lot of teams could have used that type of player. Now, I don't necessarily think his three-point shot is there yet, even though he did shoot the ball very efficiently, and many questions will arise. Why would the Raptors want to draft a guy where he has overlapping skills with some of the other guys? He's listed as a small forward. He could probably realistically play the power forward position as well. Now, the big question will be, the Raptors have OG. The Raptors have Pascal, Scotty. Why do they need this guy? I think the question you have to ask yourselves is you always have to draft best available player rather than best fit. Now, the reason I say this is because the Raptors had actually drafted Chris Bosh instead of Dwayne Wade because at that time they had Vince Carter. So there have been many scenarios like this where a lot of NBA teams have drafted, positional need rather than the best available player, and they could have had some really nice players. Now, Bilal is a very exciting player for several reasons. When you talk about him, he's played besides Victor Wembanyama. Also, I mean, that's not the reason, obviously, why you should draft him, but the reason you should draft him is because he's someone that has a long wingspan. He's a very pesky defender. Although his numbers may not necessarily show it, he can be someone that could be a good rebounder at the NBA level. His physical tools are there. He attacks the basket well, and he's shown to be a very creative offensive player. I wouldn't say the most talented offensive player yet because he's still very raw, but I think you could work with the potential there. And the potential is clearly there. I mean, it's one thing if you're talking about the Raptors taking, talents on raw potential prospects, but obviously teams like the Utah Jazz, and we know who the Utah Jazz are run by, Danny Ainge. He likes these tall, wing players. He drafted Jason Tatum. He got Jaylen Brown as well. So obviously there's something there with Bilal that a lot of teams are seeing with Bilal. So again, I would be really surprised to see Bilal fall out of the lottery. I think he's a very talented player. I would be awesome if the Raptors do draft him. Unfortunately, I do think he will go he'll probably go to Utah Jazz. If not, I definitely see the Oklahoma City Thunder drafting. I just don't see those 2 teams passing on him. So it's very unlikely the Raptors actually do get their hands on Bilal. I think another team does take him. Well, let's talk about prospect number 2 here. And player number 2 here is Cason Wallace. This was being reported by NBA District on Twitter. Shout out to them. It was being reported there should be mutual interest between the Raptors front office and Cason Wallace. This was being reported by Draft Was, and that is, yes, Jonathan Wasserman yet once again. This was being reported very recently. Now, what makes Cason Wallace very attractive to the Raptors is obviously their guards weren't very good defensively last year. Fred VanVleet, Gary Trent Jr., very poor defensively, and we saw what happened the season prior to in the playoffs where Tyrese Maxey just turned it on and absolutely torched the Raptors' backcourt. Cason Wallace is a really good defensive player. He's also someone you could definitely build a team upon. Like, he could come in, probably be one of those few players that if the Raptors were to draft at the 13th spot, that can come in and have a positive impact right away. Now, I know people will disagree with this statement of mine here, but the thing about Casey Wallace, I see his ceiling as a Marcus Smart, which isn't bad at all. But the big question for me, honestly, if I'm a Raptors fan, and I know people are high on Casey Wallace, is you want to get rid of Fred VanVleet, a 6'2 point guard. Yet you're ready to draft Casey Wallace. I know he's a much better defensive guard, you could argue, than Fred VanVleet. He's listed at 6'2 without shoes. So you have to question like the entire, I don't know if the front office still wants to follow the 6'8", 6'9" lineup mantra they've been doing in the last season and a half, 2 seasons. But the whole point of this roster was we need to get rid of Fred so we can have taller point guards. Yet you're ready to draft Case and Wallace. Again, that's 6'2 without shoes. With shoes, he's 6'3, 6'4. Really good, really amazing defender. He can attack the basket as well. Again, he's a really high IQ basketball player. Personally, if you ask me, I've watched a lot of scouting reports on him. Again, I'm no general manager, and I could be completely wrong. I just don't see the Raptors drafting him. I think in modern NBA, when you think about talent, you think about how teams win championships, you think about building blocks. I'm not saying you can't build your team around point guards, but this is something I stated in my last video. Besides Steph Curry, I really can't think of the last point guard that was a contributing factor. Again, number one or two option in winning the championship. So again, it's the way the league has been trending. And just when you look at championship teams overall in the last 10 plus years, it's always been a small forward shooting guard, some sort of player like that in that position. And in my opinion, I just think you're able to acquire point guards a lot easier than small forwards. So even if Bilal, someone like a Bilal, is available and you do take him, the thing is you can always flip him in the future. You know, teams will always be in need of 3-and-D guys, and Bilal is would be amazing. Obviously, we're talking about Kaysen here, but in terms of Kaysen, I could see why the Raptors would have interest. Though Fred VanVleet's a free agent, Gary Trent Jr. is also a free agent as well. So obviously, you're not going to go into next season with Delano Banton and Malachi Flynn as your point guards. You know, that's just terrible. Let's be honest. They'd be lucky if they do get backup minutes as well. I think they need to prove that. But Casey Wallace would be a nice addition to the Raptors. Would solve a lot of issues that Raptors had in last season. Great point of attack defender. Again, he still needs to work on his offensive game, in my opinion. He's not a great passer. So again, those are some of my concerns with Casey Wallace. Again, I understand why people will like him. And there's certain names. There's certain names like Raptors fans really fall in love with. We saw a few seasons ago, Jalen Suggs. They were absolutely fixated on him. And I feel like that's becoming the trend with Casey Wallace as well. Again, I've watched a lot of scouting videos on him. I wouldn't be mad if the Raptors drafted him. I'm just not on as high on Casey Wallace as a lot of people will be. And also taking into consideration, Casey Wallace is probably likely to go in the top 10. But after his workout with the Raptors and the Wizards, he actually canceled his remaining workouts. He was supposed to go with the Atlanta Hawks. He's canceled those workouts as well. So with Casey Wallace, I think it could be very likely he could go to Washington as well. So again, I personally, if you ask me, I just don't think the Raptors will draft him. I know I could be wrong. I've been wrong several times. So let's see what happens. But let's talk about prospect number 3 here. And I have a lot to talk about in terms of this prospect here. Now, the third prospect that has been linked to the Raptors is Nick Smith Jr. And this was being reported again. Shout out to NBA District on Twitter. This was stating Fred VanVleet watching Nick Smith Jr. at Pro Day. Now, this does not necessarily mean that the Raptors will draft him. There were reports out there that Nick Smith Jr. Has interest, and Raptors have mutual interest as well. Him and Casey Wallace did practice or did work out with the Raptors as well. And Nick Smith Jr. is following both Fred VanVleet and apparently Christian Coloco on Instagram. Take that what you will, but Nick Smith Jr. listed at 6'5", about 100, I forget his exact weight. He's around 185 pounds. Different websites have him listed differently. Now, he prior to entering his season in college at Arkansas, he came in as one of the best scorers at the guard position. Yet, he struggled a lot because the thing with Nick Smith Jr., I've watched a lot of his videos, is he goes into the paint and he has a very nice floater, but that seems to be the only offensive shot he really has there. He's capable of hitting the three-point shot, although not at a very high clip. But that's been the main concern with Nick Smith Jr. at colleges. He hasn't been the same player. He had a lot of hype coming into college, and it almost reminds me, I'm not comparing the two players, but J. Cole. I remember, excuse me, not J. Cole. I'm completely butchering his name here, but Cole Anthony, sorry, was the name I was trying to say there. Cole Anthony was one of the highly touted prospects coming out of high school, and by the end of the draft, we saw he fell at the end of the NBA draft, so towards the end of the lottery draft. So I think that will be the case for Nick Smith Jr. as well. Again, he was touted as one of the best scorers. This would be a very unusual pick for the Toronto Raptors because I want to say he's a great defensive player. He also shies away from contact. He's physically, I don't think he's ready for the NBA physically. He's going to struggle with that, especially if he's attacking the basket a lot, which, by the way, he struggles to finish at the rim, which is also a concern for the Raptors. So the only way I see the Raptors drafting him is if they maybe trade back and maybe get two late picks in the 18 to 20 range, and maybe they take him there just based off of potential. He also dealt with knee issues as well, where he missed 11 games and it allowed Anthony Black to really excel in that position while he missed games. But again, it's someone who really relies on speed and is dealing with knee issues. He's going to be 19 by the time the draft rolls around. So those are some concerns about him. Obviously, he can't shoot the ball very well. He was a good facilitator in high school, not so much in college. So it was almost like a turnaround in a bad way for Nick Smith Jr. In college, he did not live up to expectations. He didn't produce as well as he did. He dealt with injury issues as well. So again, he's someone that had high potential in terms of shot creation. So maybe I could see why the Raptors would want him in half court scenarios as well. But again, just based off his offensive talent and what I've seen, it seems like all he has is floaters. And if you're constantly relying on floaters, it becomes really difficult. Personally, if you ask me, just with the way the Raptors roster makeup is as well. I mean, I've always thought this to myself: the height of 6'5" is cursed because you're not tall enough to play the shooting guard. I know Gary Trent plays it as well, but you're not really tall enough to play the shooting guard small forward position. And I know the NBA is changing, but you're not exactly short enough. And I don't think that that's the right word, but you're not small enough to play the point guard position just because of your build as well. So it's kind of like being that cursed height where you're not tall enough for, to play one position, not short enough to play the other as well. So again, Nick Smith Jr., by the way, also at the draft combine refused measurement. So again, that is 6'5", I'm assuming, with shoes. Without shoes, it could be 6'3", 6'4". So I mean, take that as you will. So I'm not very high on Nick Smith Jr., to be honest. That's probably my least favorite prospect coming into this year's NBA draft for the Raptors, personally speaking, at the 13th spot. Again, if they do draft him, maybe there's obviously something Masai saw that a lot of us fans did not see, but that's just my opinion on these three prospects. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And as always, I do have a trivia question for you today. And that trivia question is, after 3 games in the NBA Finals, which Miami Heat player is second in points per game? Is it A, Bam Adebayo? Is it B, Duncan Robinson? Is it 3, Caleb Martin? Is it D, Jimmy Butler? Or is it E, Gabe Vincent? So I want to remind you guys, after 3 games, not including today's game, as I'm recording this on Friday night. So let me know whoever answers this trivia question correctly first in the comment section gets a shout out in my next video. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you guys have yourselves a great day.